Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. This is Sweetwater's Guitars and Gear. This time up, a new dual overdrive pedal from Visual Sound. Let's get started. The pedal we're looking at today is the Visual Sound VS-XO. Now this is a dual overdrive pedal that actually features two completely separate overdrive circuits inside of one chassis. This allows us some interesting possibilities. We have control over the two circuits using the foot switches on the front panel. We can select either individually or we can combine them together. But the interesting thing is that we also have separate inputs and outputs for each of those overdrive circuits. So we can access each one separately, we can change the order that they're routed in, we could use it sort of like an effects loop, put a delay or an EQ or something between them. So a lot of possibilities for shaping your sound using these two overdrives. In addition to those routing capabilities, we have some interesting sound shaping capabilities as well. Let's begin by looking at the overdrive on this side of the pedal. We have gain, tone, and volume controls, as you'd have on a regular overdrive. You'd expect that. We also have a mix control for combining the clean sound with the overdriven sound. And then we have two settings here for adjusting the clipping style and the amount of bass in the signal. Let's listen to some sounds. I'll be playing a reissue 59 Les Paul Standard from Gibson Custom through a Rivera Venus 3 amplifier. Here's our sound without the overdrive engaged. I'll set the controls so that the gain, volume, and tone controls are at 50%. We'll turn the mix control all the way up so we have just overdrive, and we'll set the clipping and the bass controls all the way to the left. It's a nice crunchy overdrive sound with not a real hyped mid-range. It's a smooth sound that sustains well and has a lot of projection. Now we can adjust the gain, we can turn that down to about 25%. Or bring it all the way up for more overdrive. Now we'll go back to 50% on the gain, and we'll turn the mix control down so we're bringing in some of the clean signal. We'll set that to about 50% as well. Now the nice thing about that is we still get the sustain and the projection from the overdrive sound, but we have that articulation and the pick attack that's coming from our unoverdriven sound. And you can adjust that to taste. You can turn down the amount of overdrive, or we can make it more overdriven. Now we'll bring the mix control all the way back up so we're just listening to the overdrive, and let's listen to the different clipping styles that are available. This is clipping A. Here's clipping B. The volume drops back, but we've got a little bit more gain, and we've also got a little bit more compression to the signal. Now we'll go to clipping C. On this setting, we've got the most gain, and we've also got the most sustain. Now we'll listen to the different bass settings. Here's setting A. Here's setting B. You can hear that bottom end start to come up. And as we move to C, we've got the most bass in that setting. So by working with the clipping control, the bass control, the mix control, and the gain and volume controls, you can really tailor that overdrive to exactly what you want to hear out of this side of the pedal. Now we'll turn our attention to the other side of the VS-XO pedal. On this side, we've got a little bit more straight ahead overdrive. We've got gain, volume, and tone controls as before. We've also got a bass control. So we'll begin with the gain set to about 50%. Actually, we'll set everything to about 50%. Here's our unoverdriven sound. Step on the pedal. Drop the gain back to 25%. And up to 75%. And all the way up. So we've got a little bit more gain on tap on this side, a little bit more sustain. It's a little smoother sound. Now we'll turn the bass control all the way down. It's a pretty dramatic effect. It really does shape that bottom end of the guitar tone. We'll bring it up to 25%. It's a pretty balanced sound at that setting. At 50%. It's a nice fat bottom end when you have that control set to about 12 o'clock. Even with a small combo amplifier, we're getting a chunky low end from it. We'll turn it to 75%. And all the way up. We've got a ton of bass there, but the nice thing is that it's still nice and tight. It's not getting muddy, it's not getting woofy, it's not getting boomy. It's still a controlled bottom end. There's just a lot of it in the signal. Now let's hear the two overdrives together. We'll set this back to about 50% on the bass control. We'll set our gain to about 50%. Bring up the tone control just a little bit to add some brightness, a little bit of volume. So here's our overdrive 2 is on. And now we'll go to overdrive 1. I'm going to set that to about 50% gain, a little bit of treble, a little bit of output. We'll put clipping back to A, and we'll also put the bass to B. And we're going to turn the mix down to about 75%. Bring in the pedal. It's a nice thick tone, but with that little bit of the dry sound mixed in, very articulate. Let's combine the two. That's a thick, rich, sustaining tone, yet because we've got a little bit of the clean sound in there, still have that articulation on top, a ton of harmonics being generated there. We can easily do pick squeals. No problem at all to get those to jump out, and it's still a dynamic tone as well. You can back off in your picking, turn down the volume control. And you have plenty of control of the dynamics. Now we can mix and match these however we like. We can turn up the gain on number 2. We can bring down the mix on number 1. So even with that much gain, because we have some of that dry sound mixed in, we're getting a nice articulate tone. Yet you can hear we have plenty of sustain. And in fact, even at a reasonable volume level that we're playing at here in my office, it jumps right into feedback as soon as we hold a note. So this pedal is great for very expressive playing. Now, as I mentioned, you have other options as well. You could use the input and output jacks on the back to change the order so that number 2 is feeding into number 1 as opposed to the way it's set up in the pedal. We could insert other effects, so a lot of flexibility there. And to achieve what we're doing here, normally you'd need to have 2 completely separate overdrive pedals. So having it all in one pedal and that flexibility to quickly switch between those sounds is really a great thing. I wanted to introduce you to a brand new item that just arrived on my desk today. This is the PB05, a rack mount pitchblack tuner from Korg. Now Korg used to make rack mount tuners. They were very popular, they were discontinued, and there's been a lot of demand for those to come back since. Now they come out with the PB05, which fills that niche again. Now the nice thing about this is you can use it as a tabletop tuner as we see it here. Most people probably wouldn't use it that way. You can in fact install the rack ears underneath it, which sets it at an angle, which is very convenient for studio use, or you can install rack ears on the ends and mount it into a regular equipment rack. Now this has functionality besides just tuning. We can tune in the standard fashion where we line up at the center of the tuner when we're in tune. We can also change the display style so that we've got a strobe type display. And the third style is what's called a half strobe display, where it shows you whether you're sharp or flat with the strobes and you move toward the center. And we can go back to the regular display style as well. Now, of course, we can calibrate this to whatever pitch that you like, and it has a couple of other interesting features as well. We can plug into the front, or there's also an input on the back, and there's an output on the back that you could then feed to your effects devices and onto your amplifier. When you're tuning, you can mute this with a foot switch that goes in the mute jack here, or you can simply hit the mute button and it will do the same thing. One other handy feature in the PB-05 is that it can actually check the condition of your cables for you. We'll disconnect my guitar cable here. Grab a short pedal cable. If we plug that into input 1 and then connect it here into the cable check jack, we'll get an LED indication of whether the cable is good or not. So you can see that we do have a good cable in this case. So that's very handy when you're at the gig or in the studio and you're having problems with your rig, you can't get signal to pass, you want to check your cables. Very fast and efficient way to do it right here on the front of the Pitchblack rack mount. I hope you enjoyed this installment of Sweetwater's Guitars and Gear. Be sure to tune in next time. We'll have more guitars, more amps, more effects, and we'll be making lots of music. I'm Mitch Gallagher.